Welcome to Check In with 𝘵𝘗𝘠𝘬, where we explore how to create human, connected workplaces that employees love and that fuel organizational success. Each week, I invite someone here who is leading the way in this work to join me for a conversation to help educate and inspire our work. My guest today is Topaz Adizes. Topaz is the founder and executive director of The Skin Deep, an experience design studio that produces ambitious, groundbreaking projects across the globe. In 2015, Topaz produced an interactive documentary, 𝘵𝘗𝘕, and won the Emmy for New Approaches to Documentary. 𝘵𝘗𝘕 grew to become a viral sensation experienced by over 150 million people and continues to grow to this day through videos and interactive card decks. You're going to hear a lot more about that in a minute. Topaz is also the author of the book 12 Questions for Love, a guide to intimate conversations and deeper relationships. Topaz, thanks for joining me.
Hey, Jason, good to be here. Let's do this. I'm excited. Good to see you again.
So we got to start by getting to know a little bit more about you and your work before we can dive into my favorite topic, the workplace. And so I talked about 𝘵𝘗𝘕 a little bit. And for those that aren't familiar with 𝘵𝘗𝘕, can you start by talking a little bit about that documentary project and kind of what it is and what it's grown into?
So basically, 𝘵𝘗𝘕 is about the space between. The relationship is not you or I, us or them. It's you and I, us and them that connect. It's the and that connects us. It's the space between. It's the threads that bind us. I've been really interested in that before my prior life, if you will, as a filmmaker. But now, since 12 years ago when I started this project, my team and I, we just bring in pairs of people who are in all kinds of relationships, over 1,200 at this point in over 10 countries. And we just pose different questions for them to ask one another. And we film it with 3 cameras. And we have 2 close-ups and a wide shot. And we're always showing both faces simultaneously to the audience so that you're seeing how they're reacting to one another. We're illuminating that space between. If you think about most of the content you watch, you always cut from a single, like a shot on someone's face, and then you cut to someone else's face as they listen and hear. You don't show both faces at the same time. And by us doing that, what we've realized is that we can kind of illuminate how are they communicating. You get a sense of, it's not reality of TV, it's reality of feeling. It's reality of communication. And it just proved to be an incredibly powerful tool in creating empathy and what we call deep listening. And for me personally, what I've learned is just, how do you create the space so that you can have these deeper cathartic conversations? Obviously, people, you might question, why do I want to have these deeper cathartic conversations? We could talk about that. But how do you create the space for them, I think, is imperative. And then secondly, is how do you construct really good questions that both reinforce that space of safety, but lead you into a space of discomfort and growth and exploration so that you're learning something new, so that you're having a new conversation.
Well, I love, since learning about your work, I love just the idea of 𝘵𝘗𝘕, the concept of that, because it gives a name to the connection between, right? That space. I just love that idea. That has been sort of with me ever since encountering that it's like, yeah, that's really, that's the thing, especially in a world where we're become so individualized and everybody's an individual, that like remembering the space between is what actually gives life to the relationship is so powerful. And I also would say, I would encourage people to go, and I'm going to do this again at the end, but I would encourage people to go take a peek at some of these videos, because anybody that wants to argue that there isn't a majority of our communication that's happening non-verbally between human beings, the way that you do it, where you see both faces at the same time, it is impossible not to sort of feel tangibly that there's an entire conversation going on between people that has nothing to do with the words that they're saying. It's a really incredible innovation in the way that you're telling those stories and sharing those stories. It's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also one thing that we're getting comments from clients, if you will, or we collaborate with a certain thematic theme of exploration through conversations, the clients say that a lot of the time they want to work with us is because we're able to reach a certain level of intimacy so fast. How do you get these people to open up on camera to such a depth, such a vulnerability so quickly? How, because people basically come in an hour and 15, we get our conversation. How are you able to do that? And I think it's understanding, how do you create the space and how do you construct the questions? And I think that's applied to both relationships, but also the workplace. Whether it's, you're recruiting someone, whether you're giving them a yearly review, or you're managing them, or you're managing your boss. I mean, how do you create the space? How do you construct the questions, then create the space or reinforce the space for deeper conversations that ultimately creates a better relationship, a more resilient relationship, one that's more effective in accomplishing tasks and goals together?
So I do have to ask, because I always tend to, it's just my own curiosity. I think this sort of was born out of when my kids were younger and we watched so many Marvel movies. I'm sort of fascinated with origin stories. And so how do you, I know that your earlier career, you were making films on like about all kinds of different things, different documentary films, if I understand, but like, what part of your journey, or how did your journey lead you to this? How did you find yourself kind of immersed in doing this work of revealing and studying and sharing kind of the space between, the power of connection? What is it in the origin story?
I think it's probably, if I look back, I think which was really helpful to write the book was an opportunity to take the time to really distill my learnings, but also the origin story, or what happened to me in my life that created the alchemy for this format, to kind of for me to engage with this format. My parents got divorced when I was 4. Wondering why that happened. Why couldn't they communicate? I think my parents did the best they could. I have a good relationship with both of them, but one of them I never felt seen, and one of them I never could I felt. I mean, I don't know how to. Disconnection as a young man, as a young child, looking for why am I not feeling connected to my parents, and why aren't they connecting? And I think that set me off on a journey of searching for the humanity between us all. And I articulated that first as a filmmaker with a camera, because I realized, this camera can open doors for me. It's a bridge, right? I can step into someone's life and film them, and that's opens the door so that I can see what their world is like. And so I saw the camera is that powerful tool, that door opener, that bridge builder. And so I spent 20 years being as a filmmaker, both documentary and fiction. And just the focus was questions, and my own questions that I wondered of these different life experiences people were having. And to be able to document them in an intimate way was always such an honor and a great responsibility, because you're then telling their story through your lens and through your editing. And so that, I think that was like, my parents' divorce was like the deep-rooted pain, which turned into a hunger for connection and intimacy, which then through the skill set of mastering filmmaking became a gift now, right? And I think I guess that would be, at least as far as I'm aware now, and the perspective I have now in my life. Maybe it'll change in 20 years, that I'll have a deeper understanding, but that's what I understand it now, is that it came from that pain.
Well, and you share in the book some about how that affected even your adult relationships and that kind of led then, I'm assuming, to kind of what gave birth to the book and wanting to share that gift. And so thank you for sharing that. I think it's always interesting to me how our journeys kind of shape where we end up, or what we are interested in, or what problems we're trying to solve for the world. So thank you for that. I am curious, before we dive into what I am really passionate about getting your perspective on in terms of workplace, how did you go from, I know today part of your business is live experience design. You design experience like live without the camera as the mechanism. How did you make that transition? What kind of prompted that? And I'm also curious, like, what you've learned about the difference between trying to create that safe space in person live when you're by design versus when you're doing it kind of in a more controlled, I would guess, setting when you're using a camera or filming for a documentary.
So what's the question? The question is, what's the difference and how do I utilize it differently?
Yeah. First off, how did you make the jump to live experience? What made that? And then what have you learned about kind of the difference in creating the safe space in a live environment versus when you're filming for camera or for a documentary film?
Well, the jump came, as a filmmaker, I was also doing theater before, directing theater, directing actors, whether it was in front of the camera, in front of a stage and an audience. So it's kind of like as a director, for me, it was a way of constructing a world and constructing what's a world mean. It means these are the rules. This is how the world operates. And then fueling the actors, the artifice of their characters to engage with one another. And I just always enjoyed that. And sometimes I both made fiction and documentary. And sometimes you'll get more truth, if you will, from an actor who's playing a role, but they'll go to a deep place that's about their own life because they have the safety that they're playing a role. And sometimes you get less because even though you're filming a real person in a documentary, they don't have the artifice of a fiction to hide behind. So they're more veiled. And so for me, this play between fiction and documentary has always been a blurry ground because even if I'm filming real people who are having real, and they're not necessarily actors, as soon as I edit, I'm telling a fiction. As soon as I cut, right? If I put different music underneath it or different sound effects, I'm already affecting the reality and I'm fictionalizing it. So there's a responsibility as a filmmaker to what's the story you're telling, and you should fully own that story and not hide behind the fact that, oh, this is a documentary, this is what happened. No, maybe that's what happened, but this is your interpretation of what happened and how you're lining it up. So own that. And I think we own that also in the and edits that we make. And so for me, it was always about the space. It was about seeing what happens and engaging and searching for a certain level of truth, whether it was documentary or fiction, but searching for that truth. And so when I got the opportunity, we did the interactive site that did really well, the N.Us, and it won the Emmy. And then we got invited to go take a short piece of Sundance, and we did that. And then someone said, "Can you bring the intimacy that you do in the productions into the real world, into a live experience?" And I was collaborating with a wonderful, talented gentleman named Nathan Phillips, who passed away actually a year ago. God bless him. And him and I, he was really brilliant at creating theatrical space. And so him and I collaborating, creating, taking what the experience is like in front of the camera when we do a production and bringing it to a live theater, live group of people. I just did one that we're recording now on Monday. I did one on Friday night here. And it was great. And it's always a surprise because it's almost like a magic show of humanity where you bring these people together and then all of a sudden you put them together where they have an interaction and it's shared with the audience. And you realize that humanity is not in us, but it's something that's between us. Mm-hmm. And when we feel that, I think it invigorates us in the experience of living because we realize we're not alone. So that's kind of what forced the jump, if you will. It was theatrical, but it was kind of natural for me because directing TV, film, or theater, so that jump was natural. And then, the difference is when you're in a production, you can control a lot more of the different vectors, and you're really only dealing with 2 participants. So there's a lot more that you can control in the space. You don't know what's going to happen, but you can control the space such that, and you're really focusing on only 2 people participating. When you do a live interactive experience, you can have anywhere from 50 to 2,000 people. And so there's a lot more chaos. There's a lot more that can go on. But there's also the communal experience that's that much richer, right? And that's where it becomes, just the amplification of the sense of shared humanity is always stronger when you're in a room of 50 people or 1,000 people than when it's, 2 people sharing. They're definitely more intimate and quiet and profound, but there's something about a big group sharing it and the aha moment. Yeah. And that always gets me high, if you will. I get really always a boost of life when I feel that.
I could spend the next hour just asking you questions about this topic because I'm so fascinated about just all the dynamics that exist around putting people in front of a group of people versus in front of a camera versus whatever, and just the things like to get people to vulnerability. There's just so much to do there, but that's not why we're here to talk today. So I'm gonna park that for a future conversation, because I think that's it's worth maybe having someday, because I think it's just so fascinating, especially for those that are in the field where I spend most of my time. Is that, increasingly inside of organizations, we talk about creating experiences and shaping experiences, and we talk about safety and vulnerability and all these things. And there's so much that I'm sure we could learn from the journey you've been on. And maybe we'll get to some of that here in a minute, but I digress. I could ask 1,000 questions here.
Just to say that is like, that's why I call myself an experienced design architect. They're like, well, why not just experience design? It's like, no, because design is the shape of it, the texture of it, how it feels, how it sounds. That's design.
Yep.
The architect is the architecture, is what is the sequence it's built upon. What is the architecture, right? What is that note? Like, that note is the note, and you maybe play the few bars, but what's the context in which it is played? And how does it holistically engage with all the other pieces? And I think that's why it's an architecture. There's an architecture there that brings exponential value or synergy to each individual node, or each individual beat, or each individual moment. And it puts it in a way that then creates this kind of synergy that is greater than the sum of its parts, culminating in a wonderful experience. So that's why I use all three words. It's like, I'm designing an architecture, designing with architecture, this experience, because it creates a result that is greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense to me. All right. The one thing I do want to just quickly mention, and then we'll talk a little bit more about it, but like eventually this evolved also in, and I think this is important because it's a tool. People love tools, things that they can take back, is that I'm assuming, and this is a big assumption, that probably the card decks were born out of people asking, how do I get my hands on those questions, probably. And so now, if you go visit the Skin Deep online, you're going to find a whole bunch of card decks. I so far have acquired 2 of them. I'm sure that I will have more. I have 2 in my hand right now. But it's boxes full of cards that have questions on them. Yeah. And so I am curious, like, how did that evolve? I'm just if there's a quick story, like from like shooting documentaries to like suddenly we got these card decks. It seems like there's a whole bunch.
That top line story would be the evolution of an artist into a business person. Understanding, okay, this is great. I want to create this interactive media and and new approach to documentary, but new approaches to content, but great. Topaz, how are you going to pay the bills to keep the team operating? And one friend was like, Topaz, just sell the questions in your videos. People, it's simple. See the videos, see these conversations, want to bring into your life, $30, deck of cards. And of course, for 3 years, I was like, are you kidding me? I'm doing all this stuff, And finally, just the need to keep the lights on and find a viable business model was, okay, if this works, and it does work, why not do it? And just do it as best you can. And so that's how we led. It became the viable, because initially our business model was working with brands to create these kind of media ecosystems of interactivity, content around human connection. And that's just a long process to get the brand. Yep. And then you get their buy-in, and then you have those, and you kind of, because of different interests and different needs, you come out with products or experiences that are not quite as strong as they could be and frankly should be. So then it was like, wait, I can just sell this B2C directly to consumers and give them value immediately, and I can then still maintain the integrity and really go for the content and the messaging that is important to us and the experiences we want to create. So that's how we led to the card games. And now I think we have like 17 physical editions and another 3 or 4 digital editions, and some other products that are outside the Ant family. But I think fundamental to that is people go, well, yeah, it's just questions. It's like, actually, our questions are better than a lot of the competition. And there's one reason why. Well, there's 5, but I'll give you one, which is the biggest one. Is that whenever you're constructing a question, if you want to have a deeper cathartic conversation, one quality out of 5, which is you want to make the question connective. And that's what a lot of people miss out on. Connective. What do I mean by connective? If I ask you, Jason, what do you think about love? But your wife also says, Jason, what do you think about love? And the Uber driver goes, hey, Jason, what do you think about love? You'll probably get the same answer. That's not a connective question. It's not acknowledging the conversation you're in. But if instead you change the question to a connective one, such as, how do you think we see love differently? Now, if I ask you that, you're going to answer that completely different than if your wife did or the Uber driver did. The connective question acknowledges the relationship of who's having the conversation. Mm. And so a lot of the questions have connective, but there's other things too. There's like the bungee cord effect where you ask a really vulnerable question, but you put kind of a pullback so that you can go deep, but then heal it within the answer. The question, the next book I'm writing is The Question is the Answer. And there's a lot of technology in the question framing, the question construction that I think people often miss.
I've been playing with your questions. As a student of questions myself, I've been playing, and one of my favorites that I've used with my kids, it is, what is something you think I don't understand about you? Mm-hmm. So great. It's just a great question. And just this idea of like, it's a question, like the thing I love about it is that it's a question that we spend so much time talking about empathy. How are we going to teach empathy? Mm-hmm. The way to learn empathy is literally, if you give people the right questions, it forces them into empathy, right? That's practice it, right? Just questions will do it. So it's genius. It's really, really genius, and highly recommend the card decks. There's such good stuff in there.
Thank you.
Well, let's talk about the workplace a little bit. And this is kind of where our mutual friend who introduced us, I think, knew that this was where the why, because my work is anchored in helping people understand that employees experience work as a relationship. If we want to get their best, we have to make work feel like a healthy relationship. And I say over and over and over again that relationships are built one conversation at a time. And even in my training, I talk about, like, you start a conversation with a great question, and that's sort of the key. And so it's just funny how it all kind of circled back here. So that's why I was fascinated, and with someone that has like literally thousands of questions out there, had to have this conversation. But before I start asking you about questions or that, I am curious, just as a general observation for someone that has filmed so many conversations, and you do work across, sometimes in the workplace context, but often not. But I'm just curious what just kind of based on your experience, hearing people talk, interacting with people, what is your take as someone who's an expert kind of in studying human connection? What is the current state of human connection around work or within work? I'm curious what you're getting from people about how work feels to them relative to connection. Where do you think we are?
That's a great question. I think the first thing that comes up for me is the bifurcation between, talking about remote work or, actual in physical work for people. Because I think
however you want it.
I just see that huge bifurcation. Like, at least for me, what I'm experiencing a lot of is the remote work and a lot of async work. My team is based literally around the world. We're in, how many countries are we? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 countries, 4 continents. And in some sense, it's a superpower. In some sense, it's a challenge. And fundamentally, how do we keep the humanity within us? Because we're kind of async. And soon it's almost like, why isn't an AI responding, or isn't AI responding? Because even if the human is, are they using ChatGPT? Are they using Claude? How are they using it such that they're bringing some kind of humanity to it? And I think what I find really interesting about the workplace, which I think is really important, because a lot of my work is in the personal relationships, but the difference in personal relationships versus work is that you can break up with a girlfriend or a boyfriend, but you can't really fire a boss. You could quit if you want, or someone who's on the same level as you. You might have real challenges working with them. How are you going to deal with it? And the majority of our time is spent at work. And the stakes are high because your livelihood depends on it. If we don't get along, one of us goes, one of us loses our job. If we don't succeed together as a team, this project doesn't do well, we might lose our job, the company might fall, who knows? The stakes are high. And there is a need for vulnerability and uniqueness and authenticity, because I think that's where we could bring real value, is because of our differences, not because of our sameness. I mean, for sameness, you'll have AI. But for differences, it's humanity. It's humans. And what I mean by that is the AI, basically, all the nodes learn at the same rate. So if one node learns something, it's applied to the whole model and the whole machine knows it. The whole AI knows it. But humans don't operate that way. We use the same words and have different meanings. We have different perspectives on something, opinions, and we learn at different rates. And in those differences is conflict because it's different. But it's there where there's actually golden opportunities for understanding something in a new way, right? And I think that is what's going to make the companies incredibly successful in the future. The ones who utilize AI, but it's not because they're utilizing AI to be the same. They're finding through themselves where the opportunities are and then using AI to execute or implement. And so what I'm seeing right now is that push and pull between sitting in the discomfort of the differences in us that's intrinsic with being human and that of the desire to be efficient and frictionless by using AI.
That's a really interesting point that, AI, one of the impacts that probably isn't being considered is that as AI takes off or peels off the kind of work that AI, at least right now, it's fairly a no-brainer, is that what's left over is the work that is inherent, or it's sort of inherent that there's going to be more conflict or friction or whatever in it. And so because of the differences, because of it's going to take the things that were probably less likely to lead to confrontation off our or lead to differences off our plate. And so there probably is more of that, which I think makes it probably that much more important, the kinds of conversations we're having with one another, the kinds of questions that we're asking of one another. One of the questions I was thinking about, and maybe this is where it kind of feels relevant, is that I know you have your team you have at least one deck that's oriented towards work, coworkers edition, which at least I'm assuming in theory is safe for work questions, or at least on some level.
Yeah.
What as you and the team were working on those, as you were making decisions about what kinds of questions you're going to put in a coworker deck versus a friend deck or a family deck or any other deck, what was the nature of what were the considerations about those questions? What are the differences in the kinds of questions that you felt like these are questions that should be asked at work versus maybe a question that you wouldn't ask at work that you might ask a friend?
Well, we have a coworkers deck and we have a team building deck. And the coworkers deck focuses on our mutual relationship to each other and the organization that we're building, whether it's a company, an NGO, or a nonprofit, that. The team building deck explores our relationship to each other through the lens of how are we working together as a team? How do we know when we're operating efficiently? How do we both define the word efficiently, similarly, and different? It's the context in the relationship. So in terms of friends, all those questions are focused on the friendship, which has a different maybe boundary of exploration than a romantic one. Dating, for instance, is from hello to I love you. So it's a lot of exploration and understanding versus long-term couples, which is we've been together for 15 years now. How do we rekindle the love that we were exploring when we were dating?
Sure.
Right? Co-workers and team building are just through the lens of to our organization versus through the lens of how are we collaborating. And so that's how, when I sit down, I kind of sit down and I imagine all the different these relationships, and then I really lean into my curiosity and the things that I think are important in the framework of those relationships, or of to people's relationships to the company and organization they're building, or to their ability to work together as a team. And so I construct the questions in a way that both reinforce the safety that's important to feel, but invite you into the discomfort that's necessary for growth.
So it's kind of, if I'm understanding that correctly, it's sort of the size and shape of the and is a little bit different depending on, because if I understand what you're saying, if I'm coworkers, the and isn't just between us. There's a third entity that creates this kind of space that we exist in. So it's a little bit bigger space maybe, or a different space that we're exploring.
But it still asks you about your relationship to the other person. So it'd be like, how do you think I want to describe our business or organization to my grandchildren? How do you think I want to describe our? So then you're still projecting on our relationship of your perception of me, but it's you're exploring your projection of me in terms of my relationship to the organization, and how do I want to describe it to our children? How do you think our values differ than those of our clients? Right? Or how do you feel we see the needs of our clients differently and the same?
Got it. So it's kind of like the invitation is there's the context of the organization that creates the invitation for us to explore the space between us.
Yes. Because ultimately, what's the organization? The organization is not something that's detached from us. It's not detached from your and my relationship. And we are, even though it exists, we're co-creating that organization every day by the way that we show up for each other, but also how we show up in the result that we offer our clients or our customers, and to our shareholders and our employees and our team members. Right? I mean, that's the beautiful thing about an organization, is that it too is a living organization. It's a living organism, but it's made up of the way we relate to one another.
That's right.
So therefore, if you want to bring greater health to the organization, bring greater health to the relationship between people.
Yep. Well, so let's go deeper on that then. I want to go back to kind of when we were talking about the experience design and architecture piece. And I'm curious what you have learned, if you were sort of advising those of us that are in the, let's call it, workplace design and architecture business, right? We're designing the experience of work.
Yeah.
What have you learned from your study of personal relationships that you think is really meaningful or portable to the workplace to help us if we're trying to create a more human, more connected experience at work? What kinds of lessons or advice would you share based on what you've learned from personal relationships?
Ooh, that's a good one. I have like 3 or 4 ideas in mind that come up with that. One, I guess, quick take home value is the power is in the question, meaning the answer is shaped by the question you ask. So if you ask, how did our campaign fail? The answer that question fetches are ones about, well, how did it fail? If you just change that question, say, what are the learnings that we have garnered from this campaign? Failed or not, or the lessons we got, then that question fetches you maybe more empowering lessons about what you can take away from what you've learned. So oftentimes I think the job of the leader, if you will, of the team is not in supplying answers, but in really making sure that we're focusing on the right question. And what's the right question? I don't think there's a right and wrong question. I just think there's some questions that are better than others. You know, it's a qualitative spectrum versus a binary right or wrong. And so as a leader or as an HR executive, are we asking really qualitatively better questions of ourselves, of the team members we're looking for, of what our job is? Like, what if instead of having a job description, you had a job question? Instead of saying, I want to be in charge of building community, which means I'm going to have these many meetings and get these many subscribers or followers and have them show up to these events, you say, how can I deepen the relationship? How can I make every community member feel like the community wouldn't exist without them? What if you ask that question? What if as an HR director, instead of saying, how can we best train and develop our employees, you say, how do I create an environment whereby every employee is inspired to up their game and get better, such that it's a sustainable cycle of growth because they're inspired to learn and do better? How do I do that? How do I create that environment? And so due to different technology, to different environments, that answer changes. So don't focus on the answer, focus on the question. For me and the team, when we have our strategy meetings, we don't have a mission statement and we don't have our goals. We have a question. We spend 3 or 4 weeks honing on what's the question we want to ask ourselves for this, either in the next 4 quarters or next 6 quarters. What's the question? And really define that question. Give it a time frame. Give it really understand why we're asking that question. Because I think we humans are very good at finding answers. And it's actually often where we get stuck behind not able to find an answer because we're not asking a really good question.
Yeah, inherent in that, I think, is just being, it's a reminder for me about just being intentional about asking questions. I think that's something that we just throw away. Like we don't train people how to ask questions in the workplace. It's just a throwaway. We just ask questions without understanding the consequence of a non-thoughtful or a thoughtless question can lead to all kinds of second order consequences.
Absolutely. And as the leader, you should be aware that the power that you yield by having the ability to say, this is the question we're asking.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's imperative. So don't take how do we build our company so that we have an IPO? How do we exit our company? Is that really the question? Why is that the question? How do we get our sales from 3 million a year to 10? Why is that the question? Is that what's really underneath that? What do we all gain from going to 10 million? Is it different? That's a much bigger, different question. Going, how do we go from 3 to 10 million gross revenue to how do we deepen our relationship with our clients such that they trust our brand so much they're willing to buy a new product without even knowing what it is? For instance.
Yeah.
I think the power, that's one thing I've just learned. And I think that in the workplace, when you come to a meeting and the leader asks a question, if you really want to let's say you put a lot of thought into that question, even if you really want to get quality responses, vulnerable, honest ones from your team members, if you will, in the company, you have to acknowledge the power dynamic that exists. Because oftentimes when you ask a question, the answer comes back not in terms of the truest form of the answer. It comes because, okay, how do I increase my leverage within, or my the political will that I have, or political leverage that I have, or how do I defend my own position in the company, or the power dynamics. So as a leader, how do you deactivate that? Is by stating your intention. Hey team, this is where I'm coming from when I ask this question. That way you're already answering the question of why you're asking it, so that your team members don't have to think about why you're asking it. They have to think about what's the answer the leader wants to hear. You're already deactivating that process of their brain. They're like, oh, this is where they're coming from. And what's huge, like a huge distinction that I've learned, is that as a leader, it's important to state your intention, not your agenda. And by agenda, I don't mean we're going to talk about this, and that. I mean, agenda is like your agenda is to where you want to end up. If you can clearly state to everyone where you're beginning from and that you don't know where you'll end up, you can suspect, I think this is where we're going, but I don't know. Therefore, my intention here is to let you know, I don't know, and I'm double checking with you guys. I think that's the direction, but I'm asking this question, and I've called this meeting because I want to double check that. So then the team knows, and they can give you really good quality feedback, versus you don't tell them that and they're wondering, why is he asking this question? Probably come to this conclusion. So how do I want to position myself against what I think he thinks the answer is? And so therefore people are not really answering the question.
Yeah, that is a great tip. And I found that is something, my experience is, I think I first understood that through like personal relationships, like the people that I feel are, that you feel really safe with, or that you really feel like care for you, are generally good at that. Like they're good at, if they're going to have to tell you something hard or something, they're not going to surprise you with something without kind of letting you know why they're doing it, or they give you their intentions. And that's something I know as a parent, I've tried to be really intentional about with my kids, is making sure they understand the intention behind what I'm like, the conversation we're going to have. So they're not guessing, to your point. I think that is an incredibly powerful leadership tool that we have. And I'm curious, what else have you learned in terms of advice very specifically to leaders? I mean, this is great. Are there any other things that you have found either through just all of these 1,200 conversations that you have observed or the work that you've done when you've designed the live experiences, that are kind of tips or advice for the leader on how else, I mean, beyond the intention, how else can they ensure that the environment feels safe enough to show up and answer that question fully, or that people feel safe enough to step into that question that maybe is about the and in the room?
I think the space is so important. I think it's a great question. I think part of our job as the leaders today, and it's not what it used to be. It used to be you had the answers. Do this, do that. This is what we're doing. This is where we're going. I think now the rate of change is so fast. There are so many specialties where so many people can be masters of, and you can be master of none. There's so many different people, thought leaders that know specifically, whether it's whatever the field is there. You can't know everything as a leader anymore. The change is just, there's too much information out there. The rate of change is so fast. I think the job of leaders now is to be the guides, to be the guide, the cinematic director who creates the environment by which each person and each team member can excel and grow in their unique expression, their unique talent as best they can. So when I was directing back in the day, let's say you're directing 5 or 6 actors. Every actor had a different manual, if you will, about how to communicate to them so that they would get you the performance that you wanted. Some actors, you would tell them, hey, it's kind of like this happened and that happened, and you kind of come like, oh, okay. And the other ones, they don't want that. They want, so how do you feel? When was the last time you were hurt? Oh, here. How did you feel? Why you felt angry? Why did you feel angry? Because I didn't say anything. Ah, okay. Well, what if you said something? What if that moment of you saying something was right now? So go back to there, take that energy, and instead of not saying anything, say something, but say it right now, here, in this scene. Different ways of directing.
Yep.
There's different ways of directing the space by which your team members can excel in. You have to know that. We're not AIs. AIs, you talk to them any way you want, they'll deliver in the same ubiquitous manner. But humans are not like that. And that's where our advantage is. That's where the gold can be, is in the differences. We just have to know how to navigate it. And as a new leader of the future, it's our ability to be a guide and to be a communicator, to be a bridge. And to ultimately, are we asking quality questions in a context in which people are really invited to answer? Because we have to be aware of the environment. I mean, you're not gonna sleep in the kitchen and you're not gonna cook in the bedroom. You do different things in different spaces.
Right.
What's expected of you, what's permissible behavior, what's expected behavior is different in the space that you're in. I remember living in New York, and every time, it gets so overwhelming, and I just needed to find quiet and find the woods and, the nature. And it was, where am I going to go? You can go to Central Park, but sometimes not. Sometimes, there was an incredible church, and I'm not even religious, but incredible church, the Lower East Side, and I'd walk in, and I knew every time I walked in there, it would be quiet and peaceful. And I knew that's where I could go if I needed to take a moment to really get introspective. So what is the environment we're building in which we're posing well-constructed questions for our company, for our team members, for the organization to ask? We have to be aware of both as leaders, right? If you're an HR director and you're looking to improve your team members, what's the environment you build when you go to speak to them? Are you doing it in your office? Are you doing it in the hallway? Are you doing it outside in the park? Are you doing it on a Zoom call? Let me give another example. Zoom call. I mean, we have to use the context of space to our advantage. In the Zoom room, if you will, or Google, whatever it is, what does this work? You turn it on, you're there. And we're all like 3-button shot from the kind of your chest up to your head, and we're all in the same frame. And how does the meeting go? We just start, we end, we say goodbye, we cut, we leave the room. That's it. That is a very different dynamic than the physical space. In the physical space, you're in the room, you see literally the person walking from 20 feet through the door up to you. They get bigger because they're getting closer. They sit down in front of you. There's a warm-up time. Even if it's 5-10 seconds, they sit down. How you doing? How you doing? How's the day? Oh, you got the coffee. Okay, there's warm-up. It's not like we just jump straight into it like we do on Zoom. Turn it on, and all of a sudden you're 2 feet from me, and I see you close. You see me close. And then how does the meeting end? Thank you very much. Then they get up, you get up, and there's a separation and it's a distance. It's like a fade away, a visual fade away. They walk away, they become small, they close the door, boom. In the Zoom room, snap of your fingers, they're gone. So in the physical space, we have a warm up and a release, a kind of a defreeze, coming in and deacclimatizing as they leave. In the Zoom room, we don't. So then we need to create that in the Zoom room, if you will. Again, it goes back to creating the space, creating the context for one another so that we can have processes and communication that's just not transactional, because the transaction doesn't lead to greater relationships, more resilient relationships, more fulfilling relationships, right? We want a relational conversation where it feels like we're building something together. And so being aware of the context in which you're in, I think is imperative these days as a leader.
All right, one last question I have to ask you. It feels like malpractice if I didn't, given what you do. Do you have a favorite or a go-to question as a leader that you like to use with your people if you really want to open up a connective conversation with them?
I mean, the one that I've been asking lately, because I could just feel it became time, and I kind of had been avoiding it for some time, and it was becoming a problem for me, a blind spot, was, and I say this because our business is doing really well. And so our business picks well, and my response is I get more aggressive, if you will, because I'm like, this is great. Let's go. I get hungry. Like, okay, we deliver. But maybe that's not the leadership style that's required for some of the people. So my question then was, what's the best leadership style that I can do to support you better? Some are like hands-on. I want to talk to you 1 hour every day, whatever it is. I want to check in with you once a week, every day. I don't want to see, another one's like, let's talk once a month, right? Like, what is the leadership style? Like, do you prefer that I'm more aggressive and on top and there, or do you want me to be more lying back and more of a cheerleader, support you? And it's not like the whole company has one, but what is needed for each role? What do you need so that you can perform your best? Especially in the async world where everyone's remote, you cannot micromanage anybody, nor should you. If you are, you're going to lose out, because God knows they could be doing, you're just not there. You're just not the same thing. You can't just drop by the office and peek in and see what they're doing. It's just, so you just, instead of focusing on what are they doing, you're so where are we going? And am I supporting them so that they feel inspired and they feel like they're contributing, they feel like they're learning, they feel like they're challenging, that they're getting fulfillment both in the work that they're doing, but also in the relationships that we're garnering together, that we're cultivating together. That's where the focus is at for me.
That's a great question. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So let's our time has flown. It's amazing. I could keep asking questions for a couple more hours, but we need to land this plane. So the last question I have for you is one word checkout. So in one word, how are you feeling as we wrap up our conversation today?
Grateful. I feel grateful. I mean, Jason, I appreciate your time. I appreciate all the questions. I appreciate the pre-call that we had. Like, I really appreciate the presence that you bring and the curiosity that you bring. I mean, especially with all the experience that you have, to still have curiosity, I think is like a lot of respect. A lot of respect, because a lot of people end up sitting on their laurels and thinking they know everything. And I think these days it's simply impossible to know everything. And the only way to survive is to be able to have the curiosity so that you can change.
Yeah, and my one word is energized, because I love the opportunity to interact with people that that do such different work and occupy different spaces, because there's just so much to learn and so much to it's like little sparks, right, that just fly when you get a chance to have conversations like this, kind of where we obviously have a shared passion, but we come at it with in very different ways from very different domains. So I'm energized, and I too am grateful. So thank you for making time. And I'll tell you what, I need to let sort of a plug for all your stuff to make sure people can find it, because there's some incredible stuff. So number one, if you would like to get your hands on some cards, which, I have in my hands right now, I have probably, like I said, the first of many decks that I will have. You can head over to theskindeep.com. If you want to go check out videos, you go, at least where I have gone is YouTube. Search for The Skin Deep. You'll find a channel that is full of incredible videos. If you need to be reminded of what real human connection looks like, these videos are gold. Go spend some time. It will remind you sort of the power and raw nature of human connection. And finally, you can find Topaz's book, 12 Questions for Love, anywhere you buy books. If you want a deeper, more meaningful, rich relationship with your spouse or significant other, I highly recommend you pick it up. It's a it's a fun read. It's an interesting read, lots of great stories, but it is insanely practical for how to have a really incredible conversation with your significant other. So Topaz, I'm really amazed by all the stuff, the great tools, and all the inspiring work you're putting out in the world. I really appreciate it. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Jason.
And thank you for listening. I hope you can take some of what you heard today and carry it back, right? Take it back. Have more meaningful conversations in your life, in your workplace, wherever you have it. And as always, a reminder to reach out. Use one of these questions that we talked about today and check in with the people in your life who matter the most to you. Might be the most important thing you can do today. Until next time.